This week on A Lively Experiment, the schedule is set for the special election in the 1st Congressional District as the floodgate opens for candidates announcing a run. And financial uncertainty continues to surround the Pawtucket Soccer Stadium project as Governor McKee tries to reassure skeptics.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazenwhite Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on this week's panel, former state representative Mike Marcello, attorney and legal analyst Lou Pulner, and former Rhode Island Attorney General Arlene Violet. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jim Hummel. We will have more on the indictment of Donald Trump momentarily. But first, the Rhode Island Secretary of State announced this week that the primary for CD1 will be right after Labor Day and the general on November 7th, largely mirroring last year's election cycle. This as 10 candidates, as of this taping, have said that they will run to try and replace David Cicilline in Washington. Mike, let me begin with you. I don't know whether we should get a pool going on what that number is ultimately going to be, but it looks like it's growing.
It's going to grow. I think there are more people looking into it. I know that the mayor of Woonsocket has indicated she may be looking into it. I know very well the mayor of East Providence is looking into it seriously as well. So I think it will grow. It's kind of like a no risk situation, right? People who are in elected office right now can put their name in, collect 500 signatures, grow their name recognition. If they lose, they got better name recognition. If they win, they go to Congress. So it's very tempting to a lot of people who currently hold seats.
Would you think money also, you could get out probably for under $1 million?
Probably, yeah. I mean, all you need really technically is 500 signatures to get on the ballot for the primary. It's going to be a very interesting primary. CD1 is more liberal than CD2. But I think there's just going to be a mix of candidates that are going to join in. Providence is really where a lot of the votes are. Providence, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, East Providence.
Is Scribbian going to jump in?
Rumor is that he's seriously thinking about it. It's almost like a free ride. Put your name up. If you lose, you build your name recognition, you build your fundraising list. But if you win, you go to Congress.
It's such a short period of time, though. Name recognition is key. So, there are a lot of people I've never heard of. Arlene, you have much greater name recognition than a lot of these people. Any chance Arlene Violet would run?
Well, I certainly don't want to talk about the candidates who are running because it is a potential conflict of interest for me to do that. It would be unfair to them. But I have been asked by people that I respect to consider it. I look at it, Jim, that without question, we have like a gleeful bigotry in this country where citizen is turned against citizen. And regrettably, far too many members of Congress fan that despicable pitting of one person against the other because all they want to do is just get reelected and the heck with the Constitution and the values that this country stands for. So what's attractive about and tempting for me to consider running is because I would like to call them out on that. And I think I would have that kind of form. But on the other hand, I have responsibilities and commitments that I have to very seriously weigh. And when I look at those commitments, it reminds me that my first job was to clerk for the senior justice of the Rhode Island Supreme Court. And Julie Michelson, that wonderful Attorney General, said, I'll give you the consumer fraud head job if you come in January. I said, no, I got a commitment to May. And I turned him down. But he waited in May, and I couldn't do it then because the Sisters of Mercy adage was that you have to be faithful to the little things that you promise, not just the big things. So I've got to look at those commitments.
But you've been approached on the Republican side?
I've been approached by people that are Democrats, Republicans, and independents. If I were to do it, I would do it as an independent.
You're giving it serious consideration?
I'm giving it serious consideration because of my respect for people, my consternation as to how this country has become with citizens really hating other citizens, the lack of civil rights for people that continue unabated in this country. And I think I would have a forum because of my background to address those issues, because Congress is behind a lot of the festering hatred that occurs in this country because they want to be reelected. I also have to look at whether the Lou Pulners of the world, who I was smart enough to hire, and this gentleman, Mike, that I consider a Democrat hero when he was in the General Assembly, well, I could get people who would say, you know what, for 15 months we're going to join this movement, and we're going to try at least to address what this country ought to be.
When do you think you'll make a decision?
Well, I'm taking counsel among people. I haven't. Obviously, there are deadlines that you started the top of the show with, but I just want to take a look at it and take my time. But weighing heavily against a run is the personal commitments that I got to make sure I can fulfill.
And so finally, obviously, money's always an issue, but name recognition. Well, let me ask Lou about name recognition with Arlene.
I think I mean, everybody knows who Arlene Violet is.
Uh-oh.
No, but seriously, I mean, the first female Attorney General. And a nun. You built a career on just such great character, and I think she'd be a great candidate. Yeah. And to your point, I woke up yesterday, or after the indictment was announced, and I said, I don't recognize this country anymore. Yeah. And that's exactly what you were just saying.
All right, to be continued. Let's talk about that. Late Thursday night, we're taping on Friday morning. Donald Trump was indicted in Manhattan, and we don't know. Arlene, let's begin with you. And actually, it's funny. I did not plan this. We have three lawyers. We have the firm of Pulner, Marcello, and Violet. Let me begin with you because we don't know exactly. By the time you watch this, we may know what the charges are. We kind of have a feeling what they are. How do you feel at first blush about his getting indicted?
It's always wrong, I think, to discuss when you don't know exactly what the indictments are. As you know, they're all misdemeanors if it just pertains to hush money, but to the degree they're linked with campaign contributions, that bumps them up to a felony status. So in and of itself, I don't want to per se comment about that, but I will say something about timing. There are three more serious investigations going on that I think people would identify more with. I think we're going to have an attitude about this blush of indictments, very similar to the old days, when mob guys were indicted. They were indicted with the pen because they didn't pay taxes. But I remember people, discussing back then, they said, hey, they would whack a guy here, they'd whack a guy there. They don't get him for that, they get him because they didn't pay a few taxes. What's that all about?
It's Al Capone.
Right. I think that's going to be the reaction, frankly, to the timing of this Trump, because I think it's the least
You got
Georgia,
Georgia,
of the above.
You've got the documents, and you've got the January 6th. To me, if you had one prosecutor, I don't have to tell you guys, you've all been in the legal world, one prosecutor was overlooking the entire situation, you'd start with your strongest case. New York looks like almost the weakest case. Of those 3 or 4 they're looking at, what do you think's the strongest?
I think the stronger case is the Georgia election issue.
Because you have it on tape.
You have it on tape, and you have the calls that were made, well documented. So I think that's probably, the sequence can change. I mean, so he might be indicted in New York, but that case may be more ripe to go for trial. So timing will be an issue. But I think, I think as Americans, I think we have to pause a little bit and say, certainly historic, certainly a sad moment in American history that a former president gets indicted. But let the process play out, right? He will now have a trial before a jury of his peers. He's presumed innocent. So let's let the process play out, have faith in the jury system, and let's see where it goes.
They're saying that there could be as many as 30 counts just in New York. The reality is that the hush money was paid in 2017. And it's 2023, and there's a 6-year statute of limitations.
Do you think that's what's driving this?
I think that's what. If he was hell bent on bringing an indictment, he was under a time constraint. And I agree that just because they were first to indict doesn't mean that they're the first to go to trial. I think that there very well could be the Georgia case, could be the documents. But the documents not so much because Biden's in the middle of that and Pence is in the middle of that. So I think it's either going to be the Georgia case or January 6th.
Yes.
Then the timing, I mean, the wheels of justice don't always move as quickly as we'd like. Does this push it into the election cycle? Realistically, I mean, even in New York, would they be ready for trial sometime this year or not?
They could potentially on that, but I'm sure that would be a decision that Trump's lawyers would make as to whether they want to go to trial and see exonerated. They don't know the answer to that because they don't even know what the evidence is. As you know, when you're charged, you have a right to the grand jury transcripts and proceedings, so they'll evaluate then the case and I think decide whether to try to rush it to trial because it's so weak, or if it looks pretty strong, I think they'll delay it.
Delay.
One thing it has done, however, is ratchet up the fundraising. So Trump is now using the indictments and potential indictments for, give me more money, help my campaign, those type of issues.
So there is the legal and then there's the political. How do you think all of this, I think it depends on what else happens in the other cases. In the short room, it looks like he's using this to his political advantage. But if he gets indicted in Georgia and on some of the other cases, that's problematic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, he had a good run, but, he's just not the cleanest guy that we've ever seen in politics. The things he says, the things he's done. His business just got convicted. His accountant just went to jail. I mean, there's a lot there. And I think that at some point, because of legal expenses alone, he's going to dry up on the fundraising. But what surprises me is he's now jumped higher in ratings against DeSantis, which I don't understand. It's like an extra 10 points. We'll see what happens.
Politically, what do you think?
Politically, I think it helps him in the short run, but people will get very, very wary of him, and enough already. So I think if it's cumulative, it's going to hurt him politically. I want to say one thing. Even if it is political, who but people on the opposite side of you bring out what your problems and errors are? When you run for office, of course your opponent, that's the only person who has really studied you to try to take you down a peg or two. So yes, it's political when they criticize you. When Denny Roberts criticized me, sure, it was political, but he was the one who had this interest to defeat me. So that doesn't make him like a bad guy or that it wasn't political. It could be true. So I think people have to
and that'll all shake out with the voters.
That'll all shake out. Absolutely.
So last question for you. The fact that, and a lot of people have made, I'm sure Trump will make a lot of this, is the fact that previous prosecutors, Cy Vance and others, passed on this case. Does that trouble you at all, or does every prosecutor take a fresh look?
I think every prosecutor does take a fresh look because some are political, and they weigh the political factors. For other people, it's less of a point of politics. They just think that what is, and that's what we're going to do. And apparently, that's what the Manhattan DA has opted to do.
But he ran on it. He actually said in his campaign,
I'm going to do this.
I'm going to do this.
Yes.
And so that's where it becomes political. If he had just kept his mouth shut, it wouldn't look so bad.
But you have the 12 jurors who will ultimately decide whether it's political or not. He crossed the line. So that's why we have to kind of all calm down and let's
look at what the charges are. We're speculating.
Exactly.
We don't know what the law and the
Right.
charges.
Everyone talks about Stormy Daniels, but don't forget there was another woman, Karen McDougal, who got $158,000, and that was where David Pecker, who was the head of the National Enquirer, he's testified twice before the grand jury, what they call catch and kill. He paid her for her story when she had every expectation.
Killed the story.
And then he killed the story as a favor to Trump. So there are a lot of things here that are just kind of smelly.
Mr. Trump's explanation is going to be, but this was all about my family. I never really had an affair with either of those two women. I paid money because it was going to hurt them. It was going to hurt my campaign, but I didn't do it out of the malicious
Arlene.
intent.
He
didn't inhale.
Except the timing of the payments are right before the election.
Well, I guess because
and that'll all be laid out in court.
All be laid out.
Okay.
It's a tough case.
Last week we were talking. About the Pawtucket Soccer Stadium. That Pawtucket has put a pause on its portion of the funding. Obviously, rising interest rates and other things going on. This has affected other projects. Lou, Governor McKee is flying the flag, saying things are going forward. Don Grebian, the mayor of Pawtucket, seems to be confident. As you look at this, are you confident?
Governor McKee has been saying that he's in touch, or he's going to be in touch with Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, to tell him to ease up on the raising of these rates so we can get things done here in the state of Rhode Island.
You think Powell will take that call from the governor of Rhode Island?
Not a chance. And the reality is it was a commitment that the governor, remember he went down there and made the deciding vote to get this thing passed. He was close with Grebian. He wanted to help Grebian. But I got to tell you, whether it's the Fane Tower, whether it's the Superman building, whether it's Tidewater Landing and the soccer stadium, I don't see any of those projects.
And high schools in Warwick and Pawtucket. That's a big. Fortunately, East Providence got its bill
We got it beforehand.
before all this. Mike is a solicitor in East Providence, so he knows it.
But I do think the interest rates are having an effect on the economy. That's a big loss for Pawtucket if they can't get that stadium, built. the Superman building. I mean, the national economy does have an effect even in Little Rhode Island, and it's a shame because we need, the development is there, the plans were there, but if we don't have private investors, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Blaming, of course, Powell for this is like a magician. It's certainly a misdirection, but we're in a hocus-pocus play. I mean, chances are that this wasn't the brightest idea to have this stadium. They play 17 games or so, then it's empty the rest of the time, just like when the first poor Sox thing, we're going to have all these concerts. It never happened.
Bruce Springsteen is not booked for the Pawtucket Soccer Stadium?
He's not going to be booked for the soccer stadium. So, I just think it's a total misdirection, and it's a little bit arrogant, too, to say that I'm going to dictate to the Fed chair that he's doing something wrong. Clearly, it is an element, the interest rates, there's no doubt about that, but certainly the Democrats have overspent money. They've thrown COVID money out there, they don't even know what to do with it. So the Democrats' policies have also contributed to the inflation that's going on.
Well,
now.
You make a great point because Governor McKee has kept the state of emergency. He will do it until the last day, until Biden calls it off in May, because we've benefited financially from that, right?
Right. And we don't even know what to do with the money.
Yeah. I also I heard Governor McKee saying, look, they had approval from this a year ago. Interest rates have just started going up. They should have had their ducks in an order. So what do you think about that argument?
I think it's a decent argument, but
could have gotten financing before all the interest rates went up.
Why do you think that we're so scared about banks failing? Because they bought low and now the interest rates are high and everything they bought is underwater. You sit on your hands and this is what happens. And I mean, I thought this stadium idea had a big L on it from the beginning because, as Arlene said, 16, 17 games. It's Pawtucket's no.
What do you think is going to happen, Mike?
I think the fear from the political specter is that they're going to ask the state for more money, and that's going to be very politically hard to get through the General Assembly and whatnot. So,
but he's got money in the ground right now. So, I mean, that's hard to walk. And they always say it's hard to walk away from.
I think hopefully, it probably will have to get scaled back in some fashion, but I think it has to be completed. Otherwise, we're looking at a big hole near the Blackstone River.
What do you think is going to happen?
They're going to ask the state. I don't think the state's going to give them the money. I mean, if real investors won't invest, what's the state doing investing in a project that other investors who have to use their own money would say, oh, no, this is not a good idea? I think it's a rip-off of taxpayers, and I don't think they're going to get the money from the state, although they'll ask.
They will definitely ask, yeah.
All right. For years, legislation has been filed at the General Assembly to roll back the so-called payday lending. This allows some lenders to charge up to 260% in interest. That is not do not adjust your TV sets. That is correct. Mike, you sat in that chamber for many years. How many years did they propose?
I was elected in 2008, served in 2009 to 2016. So every year that bill was there.
So what makes it different now is 50. At this count, legislators have said, bring it out to the floor. It never got out of committee, did it?
I don't think it ever got out of committee. There's two differences, however. Signing a letter is one thing. That's great. Asking for them to discharge it from committee, a discharge petition is something. A letter to the Speaker asking them to please let me have this bill is a letter. But the rules also allow, I think it's 38 members, to actually discharge the bill from committee. To force it, but to the floor. So I'm waiting for that. That's where the real power lies. If those 30, at least 38 of those 50 are willing to sign a discharge petition, but that puts you right in the crosshairs of the Speaker because you're challenging the Speaker's authority to.
And you got to worry about your other legislation.
Correct.
And is he going to back me on that?
I give a lot of credit to John Lombardi, representative.
He's really putting himself out there.
He's shepherded the 50 or more of the legislators in the House to sign on to this bill. And you know what? He's right. It does hurt the disenfranchised the most. People on fixed incomes, minorities, people in poor neighborhoods. I think it's time.
One of the things that are interesting, however, people just talk about the banking, the lobby, the interest, the lobbies for that group itself. But there's also a real estate component there. A lot of these stores, these lending are in storefronts, and so when I was there, the landlords had a lobby because they want, that's a good business
cash
to have. Cash. The landlords of the plazas in which these people
where
they rent.
Yeah. And the landlords got paid in cash.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah.
What a surprise! And it's probably not coincidental that the chief lobbyist is the former Speaker of the House, Mr. Murphy, Bill Murphy.
Bravo Lombardi. To me, the number one blot on Democrats in particular in the Rhode Island General Assembly is this payday loan fiasco. to allow that much interest to be paid to people that lend them money when they're in a terrible situation, which is what exactly happens when someone wants a payday lending. It's unconscionable. And to me, this is a blot on the Democratic Party, and they're saying how much they're for the common person.
Yeah, no.
They'll prove it. They'll only prove it if the payday lending bill changes. They've got to change it, otherwise they're hypocrites.
It creates a never-ending cycle of debt for these people, and that's again, it's abusive.
I think there's a bigger progressive element now in the House than I was there, and I think there's a good chance it will get out.
Did you ever see a discharge petition?
Never.
Or that just never happened in Mattiello or Fox,
Never
right?
happened. That's a nuclear option up there to use that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could destroy your own political future if you did that. Okay, moving right along. Kathy Gregg had an interesting story in Political Scene on Monday in the Journal about the Ethics Commission, the Rhode Island Ethics Commission, and the headline was, "Is it rigged?" Now, that's an explosive headline. There have been some troubling decisions over the years, and more recently about a firefighter who's introduced a bill, wants to sit on a committee about allowing PTSD for firefighters. So at first blush, you would think, that's a conflict of interest. The Ethics Commission said it wasn't. Yeah. So talk about the class action. What do you think about?
Well, Catherine Gregg, bravo to her for exposing this. Just think about it.
Class exception. I'm sorry.
But think about it. This commission is awash in conflicts of interest. They're married to people that it would affect that person's money and pensions and everything else. So how can people who themselves are on the Ethics Commission and conflicted to start with, how do they ever even identify a conflict with a party out there when they don't even recognize their own conflict? It is rigged. It's disgraceful. I really take the bat, and I like Joe Sacacci personally, but I take it to the people up there that appoint these people or put their names on the list. It's an absolute positive disgrace. It's rigged. We have a strong ethics law, but they have totally gutted it with this game they're playing.
And you have to, when you consider the Ethics Commission and the fact that it's rigged, the Judicial Nominating Commission is also rigged.
Yes.
While the governor is the one who is always making these appointments to the bench or to the commission, he has to pick from lists supplied to him by the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader. In reality, it's the elected officials who are force-feeding the governor, and he has to pick from each. It's like Chinese food. Order from A, B, C, and D. And so he's not really making the picks. It just looks like he is. Yeah. It's the legislators.
Michael?
I would just say, as long as we have a part-time legislature, we're going to be ripe with these kind of conflicts within the legislature. That's just, you can't expect people to give up their day jobs and then serve in the General Assembly on a part-time basis.
But at the very least, in this case, with Representative Casey, take yourself out. I mean, wouldn't you, as a representative, say, I really shouldn't be part of this?
Yeah, I mean, there were 74 other people who could have put that bill in for him or whatever. To be in the crosshairs, probably not a good idea. Listen, I was the person who pushed through the ethics reform to get the legislature back under the umbrella of the Ethics Commission. So I believe in the Ethics Commission. Could there be reforms or changes, maybe the way they're appointed? Perhaps. But we've got to look at it because we're losing faith in our system.
What I don't get is it started the thing that struck me was kind of at first blush the common sense this smells when they allowed Richard Leach. And I feel badly, obviously Richard Leach he got hit by a car, he's recovering now, but he's a judge. He was Lake Chafee's director of administration, and they said he is not in a policy-making situation, so that allows him to become a judge. And does that not erode the faith of people looking at the process?
It does. The Ethics Commission and constitution of its members right now has made it a joke, a bad joke. They all should be replaced with people who are truly independent, who have an understanding of ethics, because they're not already marinated in their own personal ethical challenges themselves.
John Marion ought to be leading up that commission.
Darn right.
What about that when Leach got appointed? What did you think about that?
Yeah, it's not...
Good judge.
Great judge. But it's not just to him, and he is a great judge, and may he heal 100%. Yes. But we've had other judicial appointments of people coming out of the Senate and out of the House of Representatives.
Aaron Lynch Prada's on the Supreme Court now, right?
She didn't wait a year. It's repugnant. Just saying. And by the way, they are good appointments. That's not the point. The Ethics Commission just saying, yeah, that's okay, that rubber stamping whatever they want from the governor's office is just out of control.
Okay, let's do outrages or kudos. Michael, what do you have this week?
My kudos is that I read in the journal this week that for the first time in American history, the energy we create from renewable sources was greater than the energy that we created from coal. And I think we're on the right direction. I think.
Does Joe Manchin know this?
I don't know. It's interesting. I think tornadoes in Mississippi in March, April. The weather, the climate change that we've had, these super storms that are just battering the West Coast. I think we're finally awakening to the fact that we've got to start doing something about our climate and the way we produce energy in this country. We're going to be underwater.
I think what you see in California is just frightening. I mean, that rain, and they've been in a drought. So I mean, it's almost like the locusts and the famine, and now it's the plenty. But in California, I think a lot of people got to reevaluate whether they want to live out there.
Yeah.
Outrage, Kudo?
Yes, death by guns has now surpassed the leading cause of death among teens and children. That is such a sad indictment in this country. And frankly, I think the Republicans have to step up to the plate, certainly the local Republicans as well. Assault weapons should not be in the hands of civilians. Real hunters don't need assault weapons when they go after their prey. The gun violence in this country is a disgrace. And we have got to care more about our children than we care about our gun.
And did you see the protest at the Nashville
Yes.
state capitol yesterday? There, I mean, a
Nashville,
lot
Tennessee.
of kids there. The other thing, Arlene, is we had an assault weapons ban from the mid-'90s to the mid-2000s.
Yes,
and
then it expired.
But here's my question. I don't understand. Maybe you can help me out here, Mike. The Democrats had the executive branch, the president, they had the House, they had the Senate. Why didn't they change it in the first 2 years?
One word, filibuster. 60
votes. They didn't have 60 votes in the Senate.
Yeah, that was it. But you wonder, I mean, what a time. It almost seems like a quaint, not naive time, but back in the 90s, how did they get that through? Because you would never be able to do that in this polarized Congress. Lou?
About a month ago, the Washington, D.C. City Council wanted to reduce the criminal penalties across the board, even for carjacking. And I just want to keep you reminding that just last week, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, his top staffer, in broad daylight, was stabbed with a knife, a deep knife wound to his throat and his head. My problem here is that, thank God, the Congress, and they had the right to do that. They overruled the City Council, and it was
bipartisan.
Right?
Bipartisan.
But what I just saw yesterday in a statistic, because I was really looking at it through a microscope, 67% of the crimes charged in Washington, D.C. do not get prosecuted. Let that roll around your brain.
Yeah.
Why?
67, because there's a progressive Matthew Graves, is a progressive U.S. attorney. But 67%.
Yeah. And so it was nice that the bipartisan, and I wasn't following that a lot, and then I thought, well, if the Republicans and the Democrats are agreeing on something,
well, that's because they do. That's where they work. That's where they live. That's the only reason it was bipartisan.
Exactly. All right, folks, that is all the time we have. Lou and Mike and Arlene, keep us posted. Folks, if you don't catch us Friday at 7 or Sunday at noon, we are all over social media, and we archive all of our shows at ripbs.org/lively. And wherever you get your favorite podcast. So if you want to take us along on a walk or maybe in the car, just download the wherever you get your podcast for Lively. Come back next week. We never know who's going to be announcing for CD1 and all of the, and all of the happenings up at the General Assembly. Come back as the Lively experiment continues.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by.
Hi, I'm John Hazen-White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.